Hi everybody, my name is Jeremy Wildfire, and today I'm going to talk about a new R package called datadigest. So datadigest is a package that creates easy to use interactive dataset summaries. You can see a screenshot of what one of these dataset summaries looks like below. We call these code books, and they contain things like variable distributions and summary statistics and the ability to generate a basic listing and a summary of the missing data within your data set. This also goes a step beyond a kind of a static data summary and adds interactivity. So you can filter your data and group it by a certain categorical variable or look at marginal distributions within your data all interactively. I'll go into this functionality a lot more in a few minutes, but I want to talk about some similar tools and our motivation for creating this package. So my favorite existing dataset summary tool is the hmisc describe function created by Frank Harrell. I've used this for years and years and think it's amazing. It has a lot of the same features that I just described from our data digest tool, variable distribution, summary statistics, etc. The version you're looking at here was actually generated using a SAS macro. I'm from the clinical trial field, so SAS is still pretty prevalent there. So we routed the R package through SAS for various reasons. But yeah, I really like this tool and recommend it to everyone. So let's talk about why code books, data summaries are useful. This article is from Jeff Leake and Roger Ping in Nature, and it talks about how p-values are just the tip of the iceberg. And zooming in, it describes a data pipeline where p-values receive extreme scrutiny, and everything before you get to that p-value kind of has little debate. And they argue that obviously this isn't an appropriate way to do statistical analysis. So I think that code books and data summaries are really useful for all of the parts of the data pipeline before the p-value. In particular, I think a lot of data errors can be caught with a simple code book. If you've got looking at temperature data and you have Fahrenheit and Celsius data sitting alongside each other, it's really obvious if you just look at the distribution, but kind of hard to see it from the raw data. And codebooks are also great for exploring data, especially when you add the interactivity in Data Digest. So I'll talk about that more in a few minutes. So as I mentioned, I worked for years as a biostatistician crunching numbers for clinical trial research. And I would get a lot of questions like this. So how many people were allergic to cockroach in our study 15 years ago? And I would say, okay, geez, where does that data live? Oh, I wonder what kind of cockroach they're interested in. Do they want skin test or do they want the blood test? So finally, 30 minutes later, I'd make some educated guesses. I'd run a little bit of R code and I'd email the investigator saying, okay, 52% were allergic to German roach according to skin test. And I'd hit send. I found this very unsatisfactory. So I think just by using the static code books like the ones from hmisc, you can have an improved workflow. So we tended to generate these code books for every data set every night, just alongside. Whenever the data was imported, we would create a code book and I would just go to the code book and answer that question. So much more quickly, I think you can get a much more satisfying answer by using a code book. So you can see that answer below with a lot more nuance. So at this point, I always felt pretty good about myself. You know, can go home early, have a drink. But then I realized that's not reality at all. So 2 days later, the second request comes in. Can you break this down by site? What about by gender? We're a few weeks out. How many people are both allergic to cockroach and mouse? And then after answering all those questions using the same hacky process, 2 months later on vacation, oh, that paper is due. Can I have p-values for all of that? So now I feel more like this, Charlie Brown. Ouch. Yeah. So this is where Data Digest can come in. I think Data Digest, in adding some interactivity to the code books, can can help to answer a lot of those questions. This package is available on CRAN, and it's based on a JavaScript library that my team also created called Web Codebook, and all of the source code for all of this is available on GitHub. Some design principles for our data digest package is that you summarize the data first. So here you see a really short summary for each column of a data set, the missing data summary I mentioned. You've got some metadata added with labels if it's available, distributions. But then you can zoom into any of these variable summaries and get a lot more information. So, and the summary is slightly different for continuous and categorical variables. You get a distribution, you get some summary statistics, you get a lot more metadata down at the bottom of these little data summaries. So you can really kind of drill in and get a lot more information. There's also a linked listing, so at any time you can kind of tab over and filter down this listing as well and see what the raw data looks like. We also have the ability to explore multiple files. So what we tend to do is just load in every single file from the clinical trials we're working on. And you can add some metadata about the files as well. Real-time configurations available. So the tool tries to make some educated guesses about what variables you would want to use as groups or filters, but you can go in and change that on the settings tab. And then finally, the fun stuff, and I'll demo this in just a second, is the real-time interactivity. So you can filter, group, and highlight the data on the fly. And I'll show you guys exactly how that works in just a second. So let's jump over to the live demo. Let's jump over to RStudio. And as you can see, just with a couple of lines of code, I'm going to run this, and we're going to generate a data digest. I'm just going to pop this out into the browser, make it a little easier to see. Okay, so by default, this loads all of the data sets, all of the example data sets in R. So you've got some data to play with. It shows you how many rows and columns. Let's look at iris. So you can see you can group by species. You can filter by species. You can let's open up all of these displays so you can kind of see the data summaries for all of these, and let's just group by species real quick. There we go. And then of course we can go back to the file list and look at another file if we want. But let's actually load up some clinical trial data instead. There's also a Shiny app, and you can use the add-ins as well. So you can see add-ins are down here for data digest. I'm going to import a data set here, and then let's make a code book. So now I'm just going to make a single code book for some allergy data, and let's think about if we can answer some of those questions that our hypothetical researcher asked. So here's our German cockroach information, and I think they asked for it by site, so let's group by site. Oh, we don't have site, so let's go over to the grouping, and we're gonna make it groupable by site. And now hopefully it's added here. We'll group by site, and now you can see German cockroach by every site. Let's undo that. And you can also obviously filter by site. I think there's a question about looking at people who are both cockroach and mouse sensitive. So let's click on the folks who are cockroach sensitive. And then you can see it kind of shows you the marginal distribution for the highlighted participants. And then if we click here, now you've got the exact number who are both cockroach and mouse sensitive. So it looks like 133 people, 31% of the population. You can toggle over and look at the data listing and kind of see all of the details for those folks and page through them and whatnot. So yeah, a lot of those questions that would take a 6-month cycle with an investigator can just be answered in a couple of minutes with this tool. There's a lot more you can do here, but I think that's enough for the moment. Let's jump back to the slide set. So yeah, we can break it down by site. We can see if there are gender differences. We can look at both cockroach and mouse allergy. We haven't added p-values in yet. It is something that is that we're considering adding in as some kind of statistical inference built into the tool. But right now, that's still on you, the analyst. Okay, this creates a data summary for any tabular data set. So just load in a data frame and you're good to go. No configuration is required in most cases. No data specification, no data mapping. Just load your data frame, run the tool. The metadata you can add via second data set, and there's more documentation about that on GitHub. And there's lots of configurable options as well. In general, they're very optional, but they're there if you need them. A few technical details. So there's a codebook function that wraps up the web codebook tool using HTML widgets, which is an amazing tool. So love HTML widgets. Then there's an Explorer function that lets you load codebooks for multiple files. There are apps for both of those functions. And then, of course, since we're in the beautiful RStudio infrastructure, everything can easily be shared and exported and added to R Markdown and all sorts of cool stuff. And typically, as we showed in the demo, this can be initialized with 1 or 2 lines of code after loading the library. And that's all I've got for today. Thank you very much for your time.